And welcome into the Tuesday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keezer here with you on this Tuesday morning. Joe Rexrode, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Still very cold, still very buried under snow. Glad to hear Nick got to the studio okay.
Nick, you have arrived again safely. Well done. How are we doing this morning?
I'm good. Yeah, got up bright and early at 4 a.m. And to my report, the highway, there are good lanes that are open. So be safe if you have to get out and about. Other than that, take it nice and slow. Don't push the brakes too hard like TD said yesterday. And yeah, you'll be good. So if you have to go out, go, but don't stay out for too long.
Joe, the unofficial count at my house. I was out there yesterday, last night, just kind of moving the car around a little bit, making sure that everything's all good to go. Got the tape measure out. The unofficial count is about 7.25 inches of snow at this household.
Okay. Yep. That's I thought we were definitely over 8. Man, now I just looked out and somehow like the cars that I wiped off now have more on them. So I'm wondering if we're around 10 here. But
it's a lot of snow.
It's the right range. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen this combination of snow and then the cold for this kind of duration since I've lived here.
No,
so we're talking 8 years.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. I'm sure it's probably happened in my lifetime, but it's been a while since I've seen it. Did we go sledding yesterday? Snowball fight? Anybody get out there in the snow?
I did not do any of those things. No. I had to pick up a kid from like a half mile away, and that was like a treacherous Indiana Jones adventure. So,
Nick, no sledding. He's already abandoned us on the program today.
Nick's already given up on the show.
We're 3 minutes in.
I have not. Done. I usually get one phone call every morning, and it's at the worst possible time. No, I've not gone sledding whatsoever. I'm about to do that this afternoon, though. Family said once I get home, they'd like to go sledding. So, yeah.
There we go. Good. Glad. Well, hope everybody is staying safe. We took Allison out in the snow, Joe, for about a minute and 30 seconds. And then she said, all right, let's take this thing back inside.
Good for her. Yeah.
Yes.
Smart kid. Yeah.
That's my girl.
Yeah. It looks pretty from inside. Let's do that. Let's look at it from inside.
That's right. We got a lot to get to on the program today. Caroline Fenton will join us at 7:00. We'll get her thoughts on the latest on the Titans coaching search, her thoughts on the hiring of Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, and much more. Gentry Estes from the Tennessean at 8:00. Get his thoughts on all things Titans as well. Joe, the Preds last night, they fall 4-1 to Vegas, and really a game where they started off pretty well. They were carrying the play offensively, were out shooting Vegas, and then a couple of defensive breakdowns, and Mark Stone ends up with a hat trick for the Golden Knights last night, and they end up winning the game 4-1. So obviously that's a tough place to play, and Vegas has been dealing with some injuries, but Mark Stone's still a heck of a player. And, after they got down 2-0, they were basically just chasing the game the whole time, weren't able to capitalize. Vegas really difficult to score on, really difficult to get to the middle of the ice. And that's a tough one for the Predators last night. I didn't think that they played horribly by any stretch of the imagination, but that's a good team that they were playing against, and they let Mark Stone victimize them last night with a hat trick.
Yeah, Vegas is. It's just a tough team to get much going on in the ozone, and you gotta get some breaks. You have a chance to maybe really be in control of that game, and you're not, and then it got away. So, it was kind of a tough assignment. You back to back, then you have a day, then you go out there for an earlier game. But as we've talked about, this is the start of one heck of a stretch for the Preds.
Yep, it's a weird scheduling quirk too. Like it's weird to me that they go to Dallas on Friday and then back here Saturday and then back out to Vegas on Monday. Like if you're a Predators player, you're probably saying, why don't we just play here Friday and then go to Dallas Saturday and then to Vegas Monday? That'd be great.
Would that be nice? Yeah, it is a little bit bizarre.
So I have
Lots of mileage.
So I have a stat for you guys. It wasn't
Oh boy.
exactly to a T that played out last night, but I thought this was intriguing, so I posed the question and had some help from NHL stats. So Mark Stone scored all of Vegas's goals. So had that been the case in regulation, but it wasn't because they scored an empty netter in the game. So that would have been the 5th time in franchise history that the Predators saw one goal scorer from their opponent score all of their goals for them. The last time it happened was Jason Spezza in 2016 against the Preds when he played for the Dallas Stars.
Wow. Look at you.
You got
Nick
stats.
is a regular stat book over there. I like it. It's good stuff.
Encyclopedia.
Yeah. Pretty
The
good stuff there.
The Keyser Sports Bureau.
Yes.
One
Very
day,
good.
Joe. One day. You can be my president.
There you go. So Preds are back in action on Thursday. They fly out to LA and they'll take on the Kings. So good for them. They get a couple of days in California before their next game where it's not snowing, at least not to this degree, and certainly not in Los Angeles. And then Arizona on Saturday. So those are the next 2 games coming up for the Predators this week. Joe, wild card weekend finishes off yesterday. I thought Buffalo was going to win about 65 to nothing the way that game was going to start. Credit to Pittsburgh for fighting their way back in there, but ultimately Buffalo leaves with the win, wins by a couple of touchdowns. And then the collapse is completed last night by the Philadelphia Eagles. Tampa Bay takes them down. Eagles are eliminated really early in the playoffs. It's really just quite a story, a heck of a collapse by the Eagles when you think about what they did in the second half of the season. And we'll get into what that could mean for the coaching staff here in just a few minutes. But overall, your thoughts on the 2 wild card games that we saw yesterday, the Steelers and the Bills and the Eagles and Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Well, to quote the kids, the Eagles are ass. It's just amazing. I really can't think of, I put this out on X. Like I can't think of a team that collapsed this much. Someone brought up, came back at me with the Titans. I mean, last year, they lost 7 in a row and all that. But the Titans weren't one play away from winning the Super Bowl the year before that.
Right.
You're talking about a team that probably should have won it all last year and was very much, I think, considered one of the top 2 teams to win it this year. Them or the Niners. It's supposed to be those 2 and everybody else in the NFC. They're 10-1, and they just turned. I mean, talk about turning into a pumpkin. I mean, they were just awful. The move. Like, how does Matt Patricia keep getting coordinator gigs? Like everything he touches just absolutely crumbles. And there he is. He got that little pen in his ear. I mean, I don't mean to blame him for all this. It's a complete mess on a lot of fronts, but that's one thing that really confuses me. And I tell you what, it's wild to think that Nick Sirianni might be canned a year after going to the Super Bowl with a team that got to the playoffs. But I don't know. He lost complete control. That thing went just absolutely south on him.
Yeah, it did. And the thing that boggles my mind is like I look at their roster and defensively they got some really good players, or at least what I think are really good players, and their defense just totally fell apart and they couldn't stop anybody. They couldn't stop the run all year long. And we talked to Charles Robinson about that, of how that's going to be the Achilles heel. Well, it turns out like everything was the Achilles heel for that Philadelphia defense. And then offensively, I mean, Jalen Hurts was outstanding last year, and, they developed a rhythm with their running game, but also their play action game. Just everything about their offense last year was outstanding. And it looked the same, like to start this year for the most part. I mean, AJ Brown went through that stretch of like 5 games where he had 100 yards in a row. And you thought, okay, well, Philadelphia is 10-1. They're going to be right back in the NFC title game. Either them or San Francisco are going to be the representative in the Super Bowl. And if you'd have told me, it kind of felt like, Joe, that San Francisco game was where everything broke. I mean, the Niners came in there and absolutely destroyed them. And the Eagles were never really able to pick it back up after that. And I am so surprised by that, because I still look at their roster, and I think it's one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. And for whatever reason, they just totally collapsed in the second half of the season.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. First of all, on the defensive side of the ball, there's a lot of former Titans and a lot of teams. The fact that Zach Cunningham is so prominent in that defense probably tells you a little bit about where they are there, right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously their run D is an issue. This shouldn't be that bad though, and their secondary is just bad. Look, Kevin Byard just he was a step slow, and then just a terrible missed tackle last night. Just hasn't really helped him that much. So
He doesn't
it's
look good.
no. But the offensive side of the ball, they still have one of the best offensive lines, great skill position. Look, they missed AJ Brown a lot last night. There's no doubt about that. Also, I mean, you watch them play and you watch other issues. I hope people are going to hesitate to try to put everything on AJ Brown. Obviously, he's unhappy and he's vocal about it, but I mean, they got issues beyond that. One thing that I saw a lot of, and even actually I saw Jay Gruden and Robert Griffin RG3 go at each other a little bit, but like it seemed like every time Tampa Bay blitzed last night, the Eagles had no idea what the heck was going on.
Yeah.
Like it was just bizarre. And so Jay Gruden, who I haven't heard from in years, is like, if I never would have left a quarterback out to dry like that or something like that, then RG3 is like, oh really? So then they go back and forth. But but man, just a mess there. And so now you consider this. Either the Detroit Lions or the Baker Mayfield led Tampa Bay Bucks are going to be in the NFC Championship game.
You're darn right.
My goodness.
Who had that before the year?
Yeah. I mean, some people were optimistic about the Lions and I made fun of them, and I'm sorry. But yeah, no one had the Bucks here. I can promise you that.
Yep. And meanwhile, in Buffalo, you got fans throwing snowballs all over the place. It's like a snow globe out there of fans throwing snowballs after the Buffalo scores one of their 5 touchdowns that it felt like in the first quarter. You had the receivers. It was hilarious. So Mason Rudolph throws a brutal interception in the first half in the end zone, and there's snowballs like raining down into the end zone while the ball's in the air, and it's just like, you guys stop throwing snowballs on the field in the middle of play. But Buffalo looked like they were going to run Pittsburgh out of the building. And credit to the Steelers for fighting back in that game, but ultimately Buffalo gets it done. What a game for Josh Allen, particularly in the first half. That run he had was outrageous for the 52-yard
Yeah,
touchdown.
it was. He turned on the Jets, and their tackling was awful. But I mean, Bills Chiefs that's gonna be a heck of a lot of fun. But let me tell you something. We are owed some fun.
Yes, we are.
We had 6 games, and 5 of them were trash. I mean, we had one good game out of 6. That is absolutely unacceptable. So this weekend needs to make up for that.
Yeah, the wild card weekend, typically one of my favorite weekends. This one was kind of bad. So the divisional rounds are set for next week. Texans will take on the Ravens on the road, the Packers and the 49ers. Those are the 2 Saturday games. And then on Sunday, the Bucks and the Lions and the Chiefs and the Bills on the late game on Sunday. So on paper, it looks like it could be a good divisional round. Now, I will say the 2 Saturday games, Baltimore's a 9-point favorite and San Francisco is a 10-point favorite. So some heavy underdogs with the Texans and the Packers heading into those 2 games.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by maybe I guess I'm not as surprised by the Niners line, even though I think the Packers can make it a game. I'm a little surprised by how big the line is with the Texans Ravens. But look, big underdogs, but I think we could get 2 good games there. Are both going to be good? I don't know, but I mean I think both of those teams with the young quarterbacks have a chance to go in there and make some trouble.
We're off and running today on Robby and Rexrode, taking your thoughts 615-737-1025 all show long on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, could there be more coaching firings coming our way in the NFL? And there are 2 that kind of come to mind that I think are interesting. We'll get into that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game.
anyone?
Mike, you have a year left on your contract.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We are live from our Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game National Studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. That was Pittsburgh Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin walking off the stage last night. So the question, Joe, was about the 1 year left on his contract. And I say question because a question was never really able to be asked after he walked off the stage. That's where the question was going. And I guess Tomlin wanted no part of that after the playoff loss, and he walked off the stage. So you got that. You got the Nick Sirianni experience in Philadelphia, which there's a lot of noise on him right now. And then obviously Mike McCarthy, which we talked about yesterday with the Cowboys, which has not officially happened yet. There's been no firing of Mike McCarthy, but I still think there's a good chance that happens. So, Joe, as we sit here today, how many more coaching firings do you think could be coming our way? And what did you make of Mike Tomlin and the way that he did not address that question last night after the game?
Yeah, well, fair question. I really have no feel for like how much trouble he might be in. I mean, can you imagine if he actually is in trouble and might lose his job on top of possibly, I think Dallas is, let's see. So you got Dallas, Pittsburgh, and Philly. I mean, I would rank them in order of likelihood of a firing. I would certainly put Dallas first. I just think that it's going to happen, and maybe Jerry Jones will surprise me, but I think it'll happen. I don't have a great feel. I just the collapse, the nature of that collapse by the Eagles. I just can't think of many things like it. Now, you see teams sometimes who like go to the Super Bowl 1 year and then they're bad the next year. In fact, actually, there used to be a big thing with like the Super Bowl loser the next year is like sub 500, like that used to be a thing.
Yeah.
But again, Super Bowl loser 10-1, looking like something, and then completely imploding. And then there's all kinds of issues and like weird staff change, like all this stuff. And then I'd rank Pittsburgh third. I don't know. I mean, I feel like Tomlin still does probably more with less lately. And look, their quarterback situation is it's funny how they were a lot more successful when they had a great quarterback and now they aren't, but maybe he could be in trouble. That seems like the least knee-jerk reacting organization in sports in America. So I'd be surprised. But another thing about this cycle, Robby, is there's just so many good candidates available. We know now Belichick has interviewed with the Falcons.
Yep.
And Vrabel and Harbaugh, and it's just on and on. I mean, there's a lot of good. If you want to do a reset, there's definitely some different possibilities out there. Not to mention the usual wave of hot shots, and then Ben Johnson probably heading that list.
Yeah, listen, I don't have a good feel for like the temperature of what's going on with Pittsburgh and their ownership and how they view Mike Tomlin. From the outside looking in, I mean, I kind of view it this way. I think it's wild that team got in the playoffs this year. When you watch Kenny Pickett and the way that offense functioned, they fired Matt Canada like halfway through the season as offensive coordinator. Like, to me, and we talked about this even when the Titans and Will Levis went up there. It's like, okay, well, it's going into Pittsburgh. Like, Pittsburgh, I even came out of that game thinking they're not very good. Like, they're not a very good football team. And yet they found a way to get in the playoffs, have a couple big wins towards the end of the year. Like Mason Rudolph had a couple of really good games. But again, think about what we're talking about here. Like Mason Rudolph is your quarterback on the road in Buffalo in a playoff game. Like, what do we really expect to happen when that goes down? So, everybody talks about Mike Tomlin never having a losing season. I think he's a really good coach. The only way, to me, that you're getting rid of him is because of the cycle. And if you feel like there's a really good candidate that you have to pounce on now, if you're Pittsburgh, that you're not gonna have a chance to do again in the foreseeable future. But I would rank Dallas, like if I'm putting a percentage on it, the Robbie Stanley percentage that Mike McCarthy gets fired is at like 95%. Sirianni, I would put it like 45%, and I would go Tomlin like 10. Like I don't think it's very likely at all that Tomlin's getting fired from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wouldn't either. And look, I still think that the question's fair if you're entering the last year of your deal and all that stuff. Um, and there's always so many questions, so much information we don't have on like personnel and the head coach and things like that. But if there's a place where you expect continuity and stability, consistency, a certain style of play. Again, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, both actually at this point, but
Yeah.
especially Pittsburgh, going back to the '70s with three
I mean, they've had
coaches since
three
then.
coaches ever.
Yeah, right. I mean, the last that you mentioned, firing the OC, the last in-season coach firing was like in the 1930s when like their OC slash DC wanted to go work at Montgomery Ward instead of coaching football. So like, so I would be surprised by that one. I think he's good. I think their roster's not very good. Yeah, the Sirianni one is like 45% is interesting. I don't even know. Yeah, I'm definitely less than 50, but probably not too far below it. So that's probably about right.
Yeah, like I'm not too far below it because it's Philadelphia and because
Yeah.
like the collapse was so extreme that I wonder if something like that could happen. Like I'm honestly I'm surprised McCarthy didn't get fired yesterday. I would assume that's probably coming today. Although, I mean, there are some people that think it's just wild that they would fire McCarthy after 3 consecutive 12-win seasons, but I kind of feel like they're going to do that. And you
See,
brought
he
up
has
something.
a great roster. I mean,
He
he has a
does.
great roster.
He does. There's no question about it. I mean, you brought up something yesterday. Like, so speaking of the candidates, so if he gets fired, I'm with you. Like, I think the idea that Greg Olson threw out there on the broadcast the other day that teams are going to be tripping all over themselves to hire Mike McCarthy, I don't buy into that. Now, having said that, he is a Super Bowl champion, and I think he's done a decent job in Dallas. So, could he get another head coaching job this cycle if he is fired? I think is an interesting question.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's like you open up jobs, and in some cases, you open up jobs, but with coaches who now become attractive candidates. Yeah, McCarthy's a really interesting case because, like you said, I mean, they've won a ton, but in the playoffs, it's been really bad. I think you can certainly blame the quarterback that he has not played well. Um, he's good, but yeah, like how yeah, I don't think teams are falling all over themselves, but would I be surprised if he end up with a head coaching job somewhere in there? No, I wouldn't be. Again, it's like Tomlin, you want to blame him and then like compare the Steelers and Cowboys rosters. I mean, to me, it's not even close.
Yeah.
I mean, the Cowboys, again, they got some guys who are about to get second deals, and then it's might get a little tougher there. But yeah, that's and here's another thing, just with Dallas, now you got Belichick interviewing. I mean, they need to get in there and interview him, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Jerry Jones saw that and started freaking out last night. So I would think that would be coming soon. And the Sirianni thing, I mean, I didn't even see like the press or anything last night. I assumed that came up, but that one's really going to be fascinating.
Well, maybe Jerry's not in a hurry. Maybe he's in his office right now and he's got a bunch of different cowboy hats for Vrabel to choose from, and he's not worried
Hmm.
about Belichick. He's got Vrabel down there.
Yeah, maybe, huh? Maybe it was actually Vrabel all along. But what would like Cowboys fans? Man, there's so many of them. I got some in my family. I gotta ask this question of my brother-in-law. So, what would the reaction be to Belichick? What would the reaction be to Vrabel?
Oh, they talked themselves into being excited about both. I'm sure. Belichick, they'd be recreating like the glory days, and they'd have a couple championships coming their way, and they talk themselves into Vrabel. I think
Yeah,
they'd be excited. Anything
yeah.
that's not one thing I feel very confident about, and that it would be a big plus if you're a Cowboys fan. I guarantee you that Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel can manage a clock better than Mike McCarthy. I guarantee it.
Oh, there is no doubt. Oh, absolutely. The in-game stuff, that in particular, is going to take a step forward.
Coming up next, we'll get into a part that intrigues me about this Titans coaching search, and specifically the offensive side of the ball that doesn't have anything to do with Will Levis. We'll get into that coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Tune in to 102.5 The Game tomorrow night for Vanderbilt men's basketball. Commodores taking on Auburn at home. Tip-off at 8 o'clock with pregame beginning at 7:30. Coverage also available on the 102.5 The Game app. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, and Nick Keys are here with you on this Tuesday morning. Taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025. So, Joe, obviously, the coaching search still out in front for the Titans here, and a hire has to be made here over the next couple of weeks. So we'll see what that looks like. There is one question, and we've talked a lot about, the offensive coaches and the style and all those things and how that relates to Will Levis. There is one question about this offense that I am very curious about with the next Titans head coach that doesn't have a whole lot to do with Will Levis as to whether or not they can salvage, and that is Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks, obviously, it has not gone well for Burks through his first 2 years as a member of the Tennessee Titans. He finishes this season 11 games, 16 catches, 221 yards, and that was it. That's all he had this year for the Titans. His career to this point, 22 games, so obviously injuries a concern there. 49, as I punch my microphone, 49 total receptions, 665 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's all it's been from Treylon Burks through 2 years. Obviously, that is not what the Titans envisioned when they drafted him in the first round, shortly after trading A.J. Brown to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think there are a lot of Titans fans that look at Treylon Burks right now and say, well, that was a terrible pick. It's a bust, and Treylon Burks is not going to work out to be what you hoped he would be. And I certainly understand the thinking behind that. Now, having said that, Joe, not that Josh Reynolds is like some, groundbreaking NFL receiver, but I did watch Josh Reynolds play football here with the Tennessee Titans, and that not go very well. And I watched Ben Johnson, and Josh Reynolds is heavily involved in the Detroit Lions offense. So it's not like they're just total lost causes that either a different system or a different coach or whatever you want to call it can come in and maybe unlock with a receiver. So that's a long way of me asking you, how much confidence should Titans fans have? How much hope should Titans fans have that a new coach can come in and salvage a Treylon Burks situation that to this point has been incredibly disappointing?
Yeah, well, a couple quick asides on that. First of all, I mean, Khalif Raymond did more for the Lions than Burks did here too, by the way.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Reynolds and Raymond's been hurt lately, but he's been he's made some really big plays for them. Also, whatever happens with Treylon Burks, that trade is terrible. I did have someone ask about the Titans won the Kevin Byard trade now, just since we're talking Eagles trades. Yeah. I do want to hear Jared apologize at some point this week for screaming about a 4th round pick for Kevin Byard.
A bag of balls.
Yeah. I mean, that one. So, there's, if we're keeping score on Rand Carthon, I think that one turned out okay. As far as Burks, yeah, it's a good point because it is a totally new system coming in here. I still think that the answer on him is more him than anything. Injury for sure, and then whatever else is. I mean, like this year, it seemed as though he got himself to a point of being healthy, and it just didn't matter. It didn't look like there was much trust with him with either quarterback. And just very little involvement or activity, anything going on. That was surprising to me. I kind of thought maybe the end of the year would be, it's not like you're going to go out of your way and say, hey, we got to get 8 targets for Treylon today. But, just a little more involvement, intentional involvement, and just general involvement. It didn't happen. So at this point, I have to go back to like last camp and just feel like I was just looking at mirage. I think there's talent there, but I would again, whatever they, whatever system they have, whoever they bring in, I still would have to consider him gravy. And again, look at your Packers. They got those guys. They got in Dobbs and they got in Watson. And they still went out and got Reed. And so they just have a bunch of young receivers, and the Titans need to just totally flip that room. They gotta bring in some new guys for sure, but he'll get a chance and maybe he'll be a pleasant surprise. I just think that counting on it is a bad idea at this point.
Burks never had more than 3 catches in a game this year. He had 3 receptions on 2 different occasions. One, the Chargers game where he had the big 70-yarder. Also had 3 catches in the first game. Excuse me, the second game against. No, it was the first game against Houston. 3 catches for 62 yards. That's wild to me if you had told me that heading into the season. Yeah, another one for you. He never had a game where he had more than 6 targets, and that only happened one time, and that was a game where he had 1 catch for 5 yards in the Cleveland game. So, I mean, all in all, he only played in 11 games, and the targets, I mean, you're talking about 3 against Seattle, 3 against Houston again, 3 against Miami. I mean, he was barely a part of the offense this year. And that's incredibly disappointing. If I'm assigning percentages to it right now, I do not have very high hopes that even a new coach is going to come in and then all of a sudden Traylon Burks is going to be the number one wide receiver that they drafted him to be. Like my question with him right now is like, can you get him to be in a serviceable like 3? Because right now, I might take that if I'm a Titans fan. Like it was kind of like the Corey Davis situation, right? Although it's a little bit more of an extreme one. Like Corey Davis got drafted 5th overall, and there was a certain point where you realized that Corey Davis was never going to be a 5th overall pick. But could he be a good number 2? Yeah, and he was for the Titans for a year. So you took that. Like Traylon Burks, I'm comfortable saying that Traylon Burks is not going to be a number 1 wide receiver in the league. He's just not. So
No.
can you get to a place now? Like I think you've got to accept that if you're a Titans fan. But can this new coaching staff come in here and make him like a good number 3? Well, if so, then I think you sign up for that now if you're a Titans fan.
Right. And part of Corey Davis, part of everybody being okay with that is basically the picks were inverted. The Titans got a number 1 receiver in the second round.
Correct.
Like A.J. Brown went where Corey Davis should have gone, and Corey Davis went where A.J. Brown should have gone. So you had them both, and it was like, okay, that's a good combo. Another part of this is, let's go back to the discussion last week with Jimmy Wyatt and me and DeAndre Hopkins. What's his mindset right now on, he's under contract for next year, but I'm sure if you're him, you're looking around saying, man, coaching change, rebuild. Is there any way I can get these guys to trade me to someone who might be winning next year?
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing. It's like if Hopkins is here, then you have a number 1 receiver. You have a good player. You have you can't ask for a better like pro, for guys to follow whoever you draft or whatever. And of course, I think the Titans may do something big there in free agency, but if not, then you're totally starting over. And that's too much reliance on Traylon Burks if Hopkins isn't here. I don't know if it's reliance, but he's in too prominent a position in the receiver room. So he's a really interesting question for next year. And, I'm sure whoever gets hired here, one of the first calls is to DeAndre Hopkins, because whoever it is will need him badly.
They'll need him badly. I do wonder what his thought process is. And, there's the Vrabel connection that we've talked about with him and Houston together. And now Vrabel's obviously not here. So how much does that influence the way Hopkins might view coming back next year? And then, what are the moves that they make via the draft, via free agency? Does Hopkins want out before that? Like, it is a really interesting part of this offseason of what exactly is DeAndre Hopkins' approach to the future of the Titans here. And if he does want out, like what's the interest around the league based on the year that he just had of trying to make a deal to go get him if you're a team out there? Like I mean, I can't put words in their mouth, and they very well could go on to win the Super Bowl anyway. But I would imagine, like Kansas City, when you're watching what Hopkins does all year, probably in the back of your mind, you're thinking, yeah, we probably should have found a way to make that work, to bring Hopkins in to be our number 1 receiver.
Exactly. And if they end up, not getting to the Super Bowl this year, and it's their passing game that fails them, which could happen as quickly as this weekend, then I think you got to look back at that regretfully. I mean, put Hopkins on that team, and I think it all fits together, and everybody else bumps down a spot, and they're fine. And we'll see. I mean, maybe they're going to be fine anyway, but I would think a team like that and others too. After watching Hopkins, the way he produced with a rookie and Tannehill with that line and all the issues they had offensively, and then you get a coach and his staff fired. To me, that's like, oh yeah, this dude is absolutely still very much a viable threat in this league, and I would think there'd be a lot of interest for him.
So how do you view the Traylon Burks situation, and how much confidence do you have that maybe a new coaching staff can come in here and unlock more of what we've not seen yet to this point from Traylon Burks on the field? 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll have more on that coming up next. By the way, Joe, Nick Keyser has passed this along. Adam Schefter putting it out there that Jason Kelsey told his teammates in the locker room last night that he is retiring from the NFL. So obviously a great career from Jason Kelsey, 6-time All-Pro, is going to be in the Hall of Fame one day, but looks like Jason Kelsey calling it quits, which is not necessarily surprising.
No. So now, how long until we have the Kelsey cast trying to overtake the Manning cast?
Oh boy.
It's just all about you, Travis.
See what he does.
I'm sure we'll blame Taylor Swift, whatever happens.
I'm sure we will. More coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Caroline Fenton will join us coming up at 7 o'clock. Looking forward to that conversation with her. Gentry Estes from the Tennessean coming your way at 8 o'clock. Right now, throwing the question out there. How much confidence do you have? How much hope do you have that a new coaching staff for the Titans may unlock Treylon Burks to a level that we've not come close to seeing to this point? Kenston on the text line says, nobody thought Nico Collins was going to be what he turned out to be until it happened. Let Burks take NWI's spot and see if he can be your wide receiver 2 in 2025. I assume he means 2024, but I don't know if, like, the idea of him being wide receiver 2, that can't be your plan if you're the Titans next year. If it happens, then great. That means that there's a good offseason and Burks was able to stay healthy and he figured some things out. But there's not a situation to me, Joe, where you can plan on Treylon Burks being the wide receiver 2. Joe's first mute of the day.
You know, I feel like I haven't had a mute in a while. Maybe I'm wrong. It feels that way.
Been a minute.
Yeah, I like the Nico Collins comparison. You know, Nico Collins was a guy, very talented player at Michigan. I mean, he had some injuries. He wasn't as dominant there as people hope. But now the difference, one, is third-round pick, right? So third-round pick in 21. So it's a different level of, you know, there's just the scrutiny and pressure. Very different on Burks it was unfair from the start, right? With the AJ Brown stuff. But Collins is, you know, he had a couple of okay seasons with terrible Houston teams with no quarterback, you know, all that stuff. I mean, it's like, it wasn't all on him. He showed some promise, but it was like, okay, he's all right. He had like 33 for 446 as a rookie, 37 for 481 second year. Now that's still way beyond what Burks has done, right?
Correct.
So let's keep that clear. But still, no one saw 80 catches, 1,300 yards, 16-2 a catch at 8 touchdowns this year coming. Now, what's the difference? Well, you got C.J. Stroud. Like, a lot of things worked out for that team. You know, Tank Dell comes in and helps. Schultz becomes a stud tight end. The offensive line's good. Singletary is stunningly good at running back, and it all works together. But he was a big part of them being so surprisingly good. So at least it's an example of a guy, you know, 2 years of something and then the third year blows up. It's just that the conditions are so much better. Now, with everybody that we talk about with the Titans, if they have an offensive line at some point in the future, I bet you they'll all look better, starting with the quarterback, and then that probably translates to the receivers. But to your point, yeah, you can't count on Burks right now to be one of your top 2 outside receivers. I think you have to plan for next year with Hopkins and then with someone else up across from Hopkins. And then Burks, you're under contract. Let's see what you can do.
How much of this do you think is mental for Burks? Because, and the reason I bring that up, because it's easy to point to the injuries and say that that's been a big problem, which it has. Like, there's no question that, you know, look, he got knocked out in Philadelphia last year. He got knocked out again in Pittsburgh this year. I mean, that part of it is concerning enough with the couple of head injuries that he's had. So there is the injury part of this that I think is a significant part of the discussion. Now, having said that, he was still on the field for 11 games this year, and outside of maybe a handful of plays, was just zero factor in the offense. And it's weird because, like, Joe, you watch him play, and when he does catch the ball, it's like, okay, he's got some good size to him. He can run. He can go up and get the ball. Like, why is this not connecting? Like, what the physical traits I think you can see are there. So why is this not connecting on a more consistent basis? It's not just all injuries with Treylon Burks.
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, I feel like just watching the last few weeks, there was just so little involvement, you know, and just so little emphasis on him. And again, Tannehill and Levis both, like, they just never looked his way, you know? So what does that mean? Obviously, Hopkins becomes Hopkins is just like, he's just really good. So for both quarterbacks, they both built chemistry with him, and they both knew they could count on him, and they both in different games heavily leaned on Hopkins. So I get that. And then honestly, like, there was more trust, I think, with both of them with NWI.
For sure.
than with Burks. And look, Burks is absolutely more talented than NWI. Like he can do some things that NWI can't do, but you always know that's where it's, I think, frustrating. And you have to put some blame on Burks, not just on the injuries, because NWI is the absolute, you can't ask for something, a better example in your receiver room of, okay, this guy's getting reps and he's getting targets because he does everything right and he knows the offense inside and out. He can play every spot. So if you just do what that guy does with your talent, you are going to play instead of him, and you're going to, you're going to get a lot of opportunity. So, I mean, I can't believe, based on what we've seen, that Burks has maximized his opportunity during the weeks leading into Sundays. And again, the injuries absolutely have to be considered here. There's no doubt about it. But he had enough weeks this year where he wasn't on the injury report, and then nothing happened on Sunday.
So to get into some draft talk on January the 16th, everybody's obviously discussing offensive line and
Mock
left
draft.
tackle
You seen
specifically.
that mock draft?
By the way, apparently a Dane Brugler mock draft that includes the first 2 rounds is coming out today. So keep your eyes out
I'm
for
looking
that.
at it right now, my friend.
Oh, wow. Look at there.
Very exciting for the Titans if it works out this way, by the way.
Okay. But my question is, like, obviously free agency is a part of this discussion too. But I think if you ask most Titans fans, like the ideal scenario of how this would break down, it would be offensive tackle in the first round, and then wide receiver in the second round. Like I still feel like, and we'll see what happens with Hopkins, but I still feel like basically a replenishing of the wide receiver room is necessary. Like, I'm not saying you can't bring NWI back, because obviously he has carved out a nice role for himself in this league. Chris Moore made some plays every now and then. I don't know how high on the priority list that bringing Chris Moore back is going to be for Rand Carthon and the Titans. But I think if you ask most Titans fans, like draft wise, the ideal scenario, it would be offensive tackle in the first round at number 7 overall, and then a wide receiver in the second round.
Yes, and do you need to sound a little more excited than that when you talk about NWI coming back? You're like,
I'm just
NWI coming back, I guess. Let's get excited, man. NWI. Although who knows? I mean, he may have a lot of suitors out there, but no, they've got
He
to.
might.
I don't know. I don't know
He
that
might.
he won't. Yeah, they've got to. They've got to absolutely have. And again, this is all like we're talking about this stuff, and I don't know who the coach is going to be, what the system's going to be, who might be retained. Some of these Titans assistants are out interviewing. We've seen actually the Jags are interviewing both Shane Bowen and Chris Harris, 2 members of the Titans staff, for D coordinator. Like I think Rob Moore's been really good, a receiver coach. I mean, there's some continuity there, but they've got to have, to me, 2 names where before they ever play a snap in 24, those, whether it's a high pick, free agent, one of each, those 2 are like prominent, and probably 2 and 3 right after Hopkins. Easier said than done, but I think that's what they have to try to make happen.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. Coming up next, we'll be joined by our friend Caroline Fenton. We'll get her thoughts on all things Titans, get her thoughts on the hiring of Kalen DeBoer at Alabama as well, and following in the footsteps of Nick Saban. All that coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Round number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 the game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this snowy Tuesday morning. Hope everybody's staying safe out there. Nick Keyser live from our 1025 the game studios has made it back in there safely this morning. Hope everybody stays safe out there today. We do what we do every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock and welcome in our good friend Caroline Fenton to the program. Caroline, good morning. How are you?
I am freezing, but I hope that everyone is staying warm, staying safe. Shout out to Nick Keyser for making the trek and braving the elements this morning.
Did you do any sledding and or snowball fighting yesterday?
Absolutely not. I do not do the snow. I know that makes me sound like a total curmudgeon. I was born and raised in St. Louis. It snows a lot there. I spent 2 years in Connecticut. Also snows a significant amount there. I don't like it. I think it looks pretty when I'm in the warmth of my own house. I don't like to be cold. But my boyfriend did partake in a lot of sledding by
I
himself.
saw that.
It was a lack of sledding, really. He just deconstructed an Amazon box and thought that was really going to give him enough traction, but it did not. So
he gets
it was
an
pretty
A
sad.
plus.
It was
plus
pretty
for
sad
effort.
he had to sled by himself, but I will not partake.
Joe, I feel like you're the same. You want no part of the snow.
Yeah, Keyser loves this crap.
He
Keyser's
does.
just like a pig in slop, a Keyser in snow.
Yeah, I do. I don't have a problem with any of this.
You love it, man.
There's something you just wired different. Maybe you have a screw loose or something.
I do. I've got skates in my trunk, man. I'm ready to roll.
Oh boy.
You gonna
Oh,
go
boy.
hit the frozen pond after the show?
No, probably not. I don't think that's.
Did you guys see
Tennessee
the
ready.
did y'all see the video of the dude like in Memphis skiing down Beale Street yesterday?
I did see that.
It was pretty funny.
Yes.
It's pretty good stuff.
I did see that. I mean, I have to take the tip of my cap to the people in Buffalo who were sitting in literal mounds of snow. If there's any fan bases that would go through that, it is the Bills and the Steelers.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. So, Caroline, we'll get into the Titan stuff here in just a few minutes. I do want to get your thoughts on number one, since the last time we talked, Nick Saban retiring from Alabama. Number two, his replacement being Kalen DeBoer of Washington. What do you make of the way that this has all gone down, and what did you make of that hire from Alabama?
Well, first of all, Nick Saban retiring, it was a huge shock to me. I knew Chris Lowe had it first, and I saw his tweet, and I'm clicking on his profile, making sure that this is the real Chris Lowe. Like, is my freak out warranted? But happy for Nick Saban. I mean, I think that we are going to look back on the day that Nick Saban retired and look at that as a major seismic shift in college football. And I think that more than anything is indicative of the impact that he's had on this game. I think Kalen DeBoer is a good hire. Looking at some of the coaches that Alabama was talking to, Dan Lanning being one of them. I think Dan Lanning is a great coach. Has Dan Lanning done enough to earn the job at Alabama? I mean, Orkin's really, his only big time job, and he's only been there for a few years. Lane Kiffin, major red flag. He feels like, to me, Lane Kiffin is not only a carbon copy of Nick Saban, but also the antithesis of Nick Saban. That I think that Alabama boosters would probably be rolling their eyes into the back of their heads, bringing in a guy who lives on Twitter. So they're just, he feels like not the sexy hire, like a Dan Lanning or a Mike Norvell would have, won the press conference probably. Kalen DeBoer isn't the sexy hire, even though he just finished coaching in a national championship game. But he is a guy that doesn't really have a lot of red flags to me. He doesn't have the big personality that maybe a Lane Kiffin might have, but all he does is win. He lost 3 games in his stint at Sioux Falls. And look, I get it. It's Sioux Falls, but you got to start somewhere. His first year at Fresno State, they went 3-3. It was the weird COVID season. They only played 6 games. And the next year they come back and go 9-3. At Washington, he's lost 3 games in 2 years, and one of those games was the national championship game. I mean, Washington had the 108th ranked offense the year before he got there. The next year, his first year at Washington, the 7th ranked offense. So all the guy does is win. I do find it very interesting that there was one head coach that never spent any time in the South, and all the conversation was not a culture fit. Not necessarily the conversation here with Kalen DeBoer. All of a sudden, nobody's worried about his ability to recruit the South. But that
Have
really
you heard him
would,
say the word family yet? That's really the determining factor for me.
I did hear that the big news out of his press conference is that he did not say y'all. He said you all, which I think is the perfect indication of what kind of coach he's going to be. But no, in all seriousness, I would say that the only question mark that I would have is, can he do it in the SEC? Can he recruit in the South? But I think bringing in Kane Womack as his defensive coordinator, the head coach at South Alabama, is kind of him maybe deferring the Alabama recruiting side of things to his new defensive coordinator.
So what do you think about the Tennessee Titans these days, Caroline? A
A
lot has happened since we
what's
talked
going
last week.
Look, I am not against the firing of Mike Vrabel. The most important thing in the National Football League is winning football games. We haven't doing a whole lot of that around here. I think Mike Vrabel is a good coach, but I also think that maybe things have run its course. So I'm not anti the firing of Mike Vrabel, but what I would like to know is maybe what the head coach and the general manager are looking for in their next head coach, and maybe like to know, if you're going to say that Mike Vrabel didn't align with your vision, I'd maybe like to know what that vision exactly is. If one of the problems or one of the issues that we've been talking about really ever since Rand Carthon was brought in was who has final say, who's calling the shots here, who's running the show. I would like to know maybe what your philosophy is moving forward in terms of leadership. That you say, and I'm not willing to say who has final say, but all of the coaches that you have requested to interview, all of the coaches that you've interviewed so far, haven't really done enough to earn final say, in my opinion. If you bring in Bill Belichick, that's a different story. But has Brian Callahan done enough in the NFL to warrant final say with the Tennessee Titans? I don't think so. So I think that I'm just a little bit confused about what they want to be, where they want to go next, just because they're not telling us. But I look at, interviewing Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, Brian Callahan. Those are all coaches I would love to see in Tennessee. Dan Quinn, not so much. I'm good on Dan Quinn.
So do you subscribe to the theory that that Jared does? And look, I understand it, that it has to be an offensive coach, or would you be on board with a defensive coach or a guy like an Antonio Pierce and trust them to go hire their offensive coordinator? How do you view the style of the coach that the Titans are looking for? Does it have to be an offensive guy for you?
It doesn't have to be. Like, I am not married to an offensive guy. I would prefer an offensive guy because when I look at the Titans coaching search, I think one of the top priorities has to be keeping Will Levis in mind. He's your young quarterback. He is your most valuable asset. If you bring in a defensive head coach, ideally, that defensive head coach would bring in an offensive coordinator to run the offense. Well, if your offensive coordinator absolutely crushes it and Will Levis turns into an elite quarterback at the top of the league, well, that offensive coordinator is probably going to get a head coaching job somewhere. So now you are left to find a new OC. Maybe that OC brings a different offensive philosophy. Now Will Levis learns yet another offense. I think consistency offensively is what I would want for Will Levis. And it's just the way that the league is going. Look at some of the best coaches in the NFL. Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid. They're all offensive guys. And that's a convenient argument. John Harbaugh is not an offensive guy necessarily, but it just feels like some of the coaches that are having the most success in the NFL, they are offensive guys. So I'm not married to an offensive guy. I don't need an offensive guy, but if they bring in a defensive head coach, you're going to have to sell me on that a little bit harder than you would have to a Bobby Slowick, a Ben Johnson, so on and so forth.
All right. So what's your top three?
Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, Brian Callahan.
That was
in
fast.
No particular order.
That was quick. I like that.
Thank you.
The Slowick, I mean, look, the Slowick and Johnson, especially this weekend, a lot of Titans fans, I think, sit there and watch those wild card games. Are like, yes, give me some of that. That'd be awesome.
And sitting there and watching that absolutely wretched, horrendous Cowboys defense against your Packers, Robby. Like, and D. May said, you can't change your mind just based off of one game. I know, but it was so bad that, and I already don't really want a defensive head coach. So yeah, I'm good on Dan Quinn, but I did see, and his name is escaping me. The Titans requested to interview the Panthers offensive coordinator.
Yes.
Thomas Brown. Yeah.
Thomas
Yes.
Brown. Yes. Thank you. I am not going to act like an offense or a Thomas Brown genius. Panthers offense didn't look so hot this past year, but
It did
also
not.
in that
But-
same breath, the Titans offense didn't look very good this past year, and I think Tim Kelly's a pretty good offensive coordinator. So
I
it
mean-
could be more personnel than it is scheme.
Yeah, I mean their top weapon was Adam Thielen. The Tennessee Titans when they
You
played
hate Adam Thielen.
I don't hate
What's
Adam
your
Thielen.
beef with Adam Thielen?
No, but
You don't like
he,
35-year-old receivers whose best days are behind them?
see, no, he's been a nice player. But like when the Titans were talking after that big win over the Panthers about how all week we couldn't let Thielen beat us, I was like, oh my God, is that the worst offense in the history of the NFL then? So I'm going to give Thomas Brown and Bryce Young a pass for this year, but I guess we'll find out.
Joe is such a Bryce Young Bobo.
Bryce Young, Bobo, Adam Thielen hater. It's unbelievable.
Hey man, I'm just saying, I'm not giving up on Bryce. I'm not giving up on Bryce, but it's a little disappointing. But you used to be with me, Caroline.
Oh, I'm totally with you. I love Bryce Young.
You're still with me?
Oh, absolutely.
We're still on Team Bryce?
I
Okay,
think
good.
it is
I feel
football
better.
malpractice what they have done to that quarterback.
By the
It
way,
really is.
Adam Thielen, 103 catches, 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns this year. So just put some respect on his name.
So
Caroline
9 yards a
Clare is-
catch?
Comeback player of the year.
9.8 yards per catch.
Yeah, baby.
Caroline, last thing for you. Where do you think Mike Vrabel ends up throughout all this? Because I will say, like, the idea of him becoming the next Dallas Cowboys head coach is very funny to me and very intriguing.
I think it's hilarious. And I think that he would be miserable if he had to deal with Jerry Jones every single day. Like, if he couldn't get along with Amy Adams Strunk, if we're talking about a quote unquote meddling owner in Tennessee, you're going to go to Dallas and expect things to be any better. I think that is absolutely hilarious. I also think it is absolutely hilarious. Before Kalen DeBoer was hired at Alabama, somebody brought up the idea of Mike Vrabel to Alabama to me.
Yes.
And I thought that is actually hilarious. Also, another job that I think Mike Vrabel would hate. I mean, I think that Mike Vrabel to Dallas is very intriguing. Jerry Jones hiring Bill Belichick feels like a very Jerry Jones move. I don't think that Jerry Jones would relinquish as much control and power as Bill Belichick would want him to. So I'll say Mike Vrabel to Dallas.
Oh, yes. I'm rooting for it.
I'm here for
Looks
it.
good in a cowboy hat.
He
Yep.
does, and he's got a couple pairs of boots.
Yeah, it'd be good.
Right.
Be ready to
Get
go.
in. Yeah.
Caroline, stay warm, stay safe. We'll be listening coming up at 11 o'clock. Appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning.
All right. Appreciate y'all. Have a good one.
Caroline Fenton
Caroline.
with us, as she is every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, talking all things football. Speaking of the Titans, there's a question that I have that we're going to get to coming up next. Is it possible that the Titans could be casting too wide of a net in their coaching search? We'll get into that. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. I got some tickets to give away, a pair of tickets to see Disturbed with special guest Falling in Reverse at Bridgestone Arena on Saturday, February 17th. Be caller number 3, 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. Caller 3 will win a pair of tickets to see Disturbed with special guest Falling in Reverse at Bridgestone Arena coming up on Saturday, February 17th, 615-737-1025. Thanks to Caroline Fenton for being with us in the last segment. So she brought up the Thomas Brown requesting to be interviewed by the Titans offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. And I saw Terry McCormick throwing this out there on Twitter yesterday, which is an interesting question. Like, is it possible that the Titans are casting maybe too wide of a search when it comes to their next head coaching search? It does feel like they are connected to pretty much everybody that's not named Bill Belichick or Pete Carroll or Jim Harbaugh in this coaching search. It feels like everybody else the Titans are at least in contact with. What do you make of that idea that maybe the Titans are casting too wide of a net in their coaching search?
It's an interesting question. And again, I'd love to have it all organized. I mean, it probably wouldn't be that hard to figure it out or to do it, but to see all the coaches with openings, how many they interview, who all they interview, and, you know, kind of cross-reference all that. Seems like Titans have the biggest pool. But my question is, what's wrong with that? Like, what? I mean, like, what are they doing? You know, like, what are they doing otherwise? Are you getting ready for the draft? Of course. You know, and you're obviously you're grinding through all the film and the analytics and all the things, getting ready for a huge offseason in terms of, player choices, which, of course, you're also trying to figure out who you're bringing in, who's going to have a significant say in all these things, whatever, however we think it's going to go down. Again, I think it's pretty clear from the firing of Mike Vrabel that Amy Adams Strong hates the idea of a coach having full control. So we know that's not going to be the case, right? But we also know it's still going to be a coach with a lot of say, as it should be. But like, what else you got going on, man? You do some interview everybody. Why the hell not? Interview 20 people and compare and contrast and get as much a feel as you can possibly get for as many candidates as possible, and then you cut it down. I mean, I have no problem with it. I guess at some point, obviously you want to whittle it down and you want to really focus in on a real core group that you're interested in. But I don't see anything wrong with some, initial interviews with a bunch of people.
I don't either. I mean, I do think you can overcomplicate things sometimes when you're talking to so many people rather than just focusing in on who you actually want to go hire. But on the surface, no, I don't have a problem with the Titans being connected to as many people as they are. I mean, I do find it interesting that they're not even like considering interviewing Bill Belichick or Jim Harbaugh. Like, look,
there you go. That tells you what she thinks.
It does tell you what she thinks, but like, it's also like, what if, and maybe they don't feel this way, but what if you think Jim Harbaugh is like the best coach available on the market? Aren't you doing yourself a little bit of disservice by not interviewing? Like, I understand that the dynamic of bringing in a Belichick or bringing in a Harbaugh is different from going out and hiring Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick, right? Like, those guys have been around, especially Belichick, right? He's been around. He's won 6 Super Bowls. He's going to probably ask for things that those guys are not qualified to ask for. Even Harbaugh, like Harbaugh is at Michigan. To leave to come take a job in the NFL probably is going to want some level of control. So I get it. Like, the Titans don't want to do that. It just is interesting to me that they are connected to pretty much everybody else in this coaching search right now, other than those two.
No, and that's the thing. You don't know. Maybe we've talked about this. Maybe Belichick's like, you know what? As it turns out, the way we did things, I'm a coach. I just want to be a coach. And Harbaugh, who knows exactly how he views it. Obviously, he had issues with Balky going back with San Fran, which is why he left the NFL. But I do wonder, sometimes maybe there's back channel conversations where it's just like, I do feel like Harbaugh is a really he's like, it's either like this job or yeah, I'm good. He's gonna get a huge raise at Michigan, all that stuff. Belichick, maybe, so maybe that's part of the answer, but it does feel like right from the jump, it was like, nope, no thank you to those guys.
Right.
They're gonna try to be too dominant in the building. We can't have that. And so it's almost like in a different way. And again, I was for, re-signing Ryan Tannehill, but it's like, Tom Brady, you had a chance to go after Tom Brady, didn't do it. Now you have a chance to go after Bill Belichick, not going to do it.
And again, like I don't really on the surface have a huge problem with that. Like if I had my choice, it probably would not be Bill Belichick, who I'd go out and hire for the Titans. And I think most Titans fans probably agree with that. It just
Same.
is interesting the philosophy and approach that way. And look, we'll see. I mean, I wonder like if you gave Amy Adams Strunk and Rand Carthon like some truth serum, who are the 3 or 4 people that they're really targeting? Because when you go into this, you have to have like a certain level of idea of who you're looking for and who you're targeting. And that doesn't mean that you can't interview somebody and be absolutely blown away by it and change the way that you think. But I would assume that like there was some level of plan that they had heading into this process. And I would love to know if that's been changed, if that's been influenced. Like, did Antonio Pierce come in and just knock their socks off with an interview? Did that change the way they view things? So that from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with them interviewing as many people as possible, because maybe somebody does come in there that you weren't expecting to really consider, that comes in there and just blows you away with an interview.
Exactly. Yeah. Pierce is a good example. And, who knows if he's going to be available, probably less likely than not, from what it sounds like. But yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's like everybody immediately goes to the Slowicks and the Johnsons and all that stuff. But I mean, I like that. Maybe Thomas Brown is just like, holy crap, this guy is so impressive. Look, if we're talking about OCs, I think Dave Canales with the Bucks. Gotta look at that guy and say, man, look at Baker Mayfield had like better numbers than Brady this year in Brady's great year, and that's Baker Mayfield. And I mean that offense is, it's good. They have good receivers like they had with Brady, but I feel like that guy. You throw him on the list too. Interview everybody. I mean, but you're probably right. I'm sure that there's more of a focused group that they expect to be finalists or whatever, however you're going to organize it. But you never know. You never know if someone comes in and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't look at it that way. You got to really take this guy seriously now.
Coming up next, we'll get into the Predators. How do we view the UC Saros situation, both with the way that he's playing right now and how that could influence a long-term contract with UC Saros as well? We'll get back into that discussion. Take your thoughts. 615-737-1025, our phone number. That's coming up next. Tune in to 94.9 The Fan this Thursday night for Vanderbilt women's basketball. Commodores will be at home taking on Auburn. Tip-off at 6:30, pregame at 6:15. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Preds lose last night 4-1 to the Vegas Golden Knights. UC Saros in net again. And Joe, we talked a little bit about him yesterday. It's been an interesting season for him to this point. His numbers are currently a 3.02 goals against average, so just above 3, and a 900 save percentage, which is not very good. His career numbers are 262 goals against and a 917 save percentage. So he's well below his career numbers so far this season. He's had some stretches this year where he's looked great. He's had some stretches where he's looked bad, and that's kind of how you've ended up at the save percentage and the numbers that he's at right now. It's interesting to watch this happen. I talked yesterday about the new system, and I do think that that's affected, especially in the early part of the year, Saros and the way that he's played a little bit. But he is eligible to sign a contract extension on July 1st. So he's got one more year after this one remaining on his current contract. He is eligible for a contract extension on July 1st of this summer. So you have a chance, if you're the Predators and you want to do it, to go ahead and lock him up long term. There's also the idea that some Predators fans are still throwing out there of trying to trade UC Saros, bringing up Yaroslav Askarov, and Askarov being the goalie that you go with in the future. Joe, if you're Barry Trotz, and I think you would agree with me on this, the signs, at least that I read, pointing into this season kind of lended itself to the idea that the Predators were going to try to sign Saros to an extension. That's kind of the vibe that I got. That's kind of the just kind of the way the wind was blowing. Of it felt like the Predators, when the time came, wanted to extend UC Saros and sign him to a long-term deal. I'm not saying that that's changed. I'm not saying it should change, but I do wonder, based on the way that this season has gone to this point, how are you viewing the way that Saros has played if you're Barry Trotz? And does that have any impact at all in your mind, Joe, of his long-term future here with the franchise?
It's really interesting. Like, there's so much to it, including how do we, how does Barry Trotz evaluate everything right now for this season? Because obviously the Preds are always going to say, no, we're not good enough in front of them and all that stuff, just like everybody says about every goalie. But the underlying numbers suggest that it's not that simple. It's not just like new system and they hang him out to dry a little bit more. I mean, there's some slippage in the numbers. There is, of course, like there's that question. There's the question of, what do you really think Yaroslav Askarov is going to be? Do you think he's going to be great? Because obviously, if you can have some years with him at price control, and he's a legit starting goalie in this league, then that really gives you flexibility to build up your roster. So I like you said, I mean, I think in the summer, Barry Trotz was also openly open about possibly moving Saros, which made sense to me. We talked about it a lot, right? It's just like the timing works out that you don't have to get to that next contract where you might regret the number he's getting a little bit later in the deal, right? And then you can just move to the next guy. But obviously, he didn't like what he saw. So I'm going to go to, quote. I'm going to go to this Trotz, and it wasn't like it was just me. He was saying this stuff to me, but this is a quote I got from Trotz in October. Okay, quote. Saros wants to be here. If he wants to be here, I want him to be here. The number has to be right. His agents are tough negotiators. They were Shea Weber's agents, but they work for the player. The player can say where he wants to be. I think UC is special. And actually, when we go to Calgary, and this is in October, I told his agent, we want to sit down with you. Let's talk and see what you're thinking. Hellebuck's signing sort of sets the bar. And, of course, he just signed at 30, a 7-year, $59.5 million extension, AAV of 8.5. The guy who has won a Vezina, unlike Saros, but very similar career numbers and all that stuff. So where is that now? I mean, I'm assuming they've talked a few times, right? Nothing's happened.
Well, and keep in mind, like nothing can happen.
Nothing can happen to this. Yeah,
Right,
nothing can happen to this. Right. But yeah, it's like it's interesting. Like I guess it's not like you're expecting Barry Trotz to give you constant, play-by-play of those discussions. But like, is his thinking any different now that we're in January and it has been a tough season for Saros?
Well, I think it's that, but it's also like I think part of this conversation has always been, in addition to Saros, how does Askarov look?
Yeah.
And after a slow start for him this year, he looks great. His numbers are outrageous. He's got a 2.01 goals against average in Milwaukee and a 926 save percentage. I mean, he's been great for the Admirals. So, and look, he came up here and had, a nice cup of coffee with the Predators, came in relief one game, and then got the big win in Washington and shut down Ovechkin and Kuznetsov in the shootout. But the answer to that question so far this year is Askarov looks outstanding. So how does that factor into your decision-making moving forward? Now, obviously the AHL and the NHL are two completely different things, but he is 21 years old, and I think he's tracking to be a really good player. So when you factor in the whole picture of what Saros has looked like through half a season at the age of 28 and what Askarov has looked like in Milwaukee so far this year, does that influence your thinking at all? Now, look, I know a lot of Predators fans, with the way that things have gone lately with Saros, are worried about it. I'm still not worried about him long term. Like, I think he's going to be fine. There's too much of a body of work that shows me that Saros is an elite goalie for me to just totally panic about what we've seen so far. There's no question there has been some slippage, and some of the high danger save percentage numbers that we're used to seeing be just outstanding from Saros have been not very good so far this year. So it's not been a good start to the season for him. Having said that, I'm not to the point with Saros where I'm worried that he's just lost it and he's not going to rebound from this moving forward.
Right, but it's not about he's still good. I mean, to me, you don't do this next deal unless you're like, he is going to be great for the next few years. And also, I think you got to have I think we've both agreed on this and talked about it before, but to me, it just doesn't make sense to have both of those guys. I think you got to pick one. I understand, hey, I'd be a heck of a goalie like next year, Saros and Askarov, but I think you have to pick a path. And so to me, the Saros path of that kind of a contract from here has got to be absolute conviction. One, that he's going to be great.
Yeah.
Like same numbers. He's got to be in the 920s, and he's got to be all you got to believe that. And also, I think you have to have some serious doubts about Askarov, because if Askarov is going to be what all of his talent and potential suggests, and I think that's the path I would go.
Well, I said it last summer, like when we were discussing this. I have real hesitation paying a goalie that much, and it's not like you can't win when you do that. Like, obviously, Vasilevsky's been paid a lot of money, and he has been worth it. Look, Hellebuck's a good example. I think he's a great goalie. They paid him a lot of money. That team looks awesome this year, and he's a big part of it. So it's not like if you're the Predators and you hand out a big contract to UC Saros that you can't win. I do think the Predators, and this is not just a Saros discussion, I think they're in a spot right now where they need to be really selective about who they give money to and for how long they do it. And you could throw Tommy Novak into that discussion. There's a lot of guys you can throw into that discussion long term of, you have to me, you've just gotten yourself out of a place as a franchise where, David Poile got the Ryan Ellis contract out from underneath him. They moved on from Johansson. They moved on from Duchesne. I mean, you were in a spot there. I mean, Turris was there for a while. You were in a spot there for a while where your future was locked up and you had spent all your money and you just kind of dug your way out of that. I think you need to be selective about how you spend that money as you move forward here if you're Barry Trotz. And that doesn't mean necessarily that it can't be UC Saros. But I said last summer, like, to me, if it's close and you think Askarov is going to be great, it's kind of like the quarterback discussion, right? Like if you think a quarterback is going to be great in the draft and you're in a spot to draft the quarterback, well, then you draft the quarterback and you restart the clock, right? Like the goalie situation can be viewed the same way. It may not be, but it can be viewed the same way.
Right. The difference being, what's the return on a trade. It's not it's obviously not as good as I thought it might be for Saros, but like a
Well,
texter
this year's not helping that either, by the way.
exactly. A texter saying like it's not fair to him, to Saros. He was the reason this team was better during Hines' years, and one rough year shouldn't sour our opinion on him. And I don't disagree with that, but that's just not what it's about. I mean, it's just, are you going to pay him that kind of money? That's the whole thing. And like, Ethan from Lawrenceburg, 1A, 1B with those two. I think if Askarov is that good, I just think that you're wasting money, and like when you need that money in this league with the cap the way it is to help your roster, like to pay Saros and then just have Askarov as if Sakharov is that good, to just have him as your back. It's not the same as Saros. Saros came up with Pecorine. People didn't know he was going to be as good as he was, right? And it kind of developed over a few years of him being a really good backup. You just didn't know. And this is totally different where you drafted Askarov and all the chatter around him. It's just a different situation.
Well, and the main difference on that was like Pekka was in his mid-30s and Saros was just coming up. Saros is 28 right now. So,
Right,
I mean,
right.
if you believe that Saros is going to be a great goalie for the next 5, 6, 7 years, well, then you make that decision and you pay him. But at some point, Askarov is going to be ready to play. And the question you got to determine is Askarov going to be ready to play for you, or is he going to be ready to play for somebody else and you can flip him? Because to me, I'm with you. Like the idea of keeping both of them for an extended period of time. I'm not saying you can't have like maybe a 1-year stretch where you keep both of them, but the idea of keeping both of them for an extended period of time feels like a little bit of asset mismanagement to me.
No question. I mean, just look at the holes and what else you could do, with your forwards. I mean, I think you have to, again, you got to pick a path. So Saros is, I mean, I wild speculation, but like, is this year, reflective at all of Saros kind of understanding the pressure and all that, and like sort of like how things are coming to a head? I mean, I have no idea. I just know that he hasn't played as well. I mean, like there's no spin on his play. It's not as good this year.
No question about it. Coming up next, it's time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You can check it out every morning at 7:45. We'll do that next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment, let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
Give it up to everybody in this room. First 7th seed in the history of the NFL to win a playoff game. But wait, there's more. There's a hell of a lot more. First of all, starting out with defense. Give it up for our kickoff team. Give it up for Jay Reed and Musgrave recovering those onsides. How about Daniel Whelan, 3 punts inside the 10? How about our defense? Give it up for our defense. This guy finished with the highest QB rating in Packer history at 150.
It is that time of the day, time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You can check it out every morning at 7:45. Joe, I'm reminded that Matt LaFleur should just coach and not talk every time I hear him talk. But that's okay. I enjoyed it.
Well, hey, oh, good. I'm glad that you just set up my rant perfectly with that little shot that you took at Matt LaFleur. You know, he's no Dan Campbell with the post-game speeches. I will admit that. But I want to remind everyone, especially you, the Green Bay Packers just went into Dallas, beat the Dallas Cowboys 48-32 in a game that was 48-16 before LaFleur pulled the starters. Now, then he put him back in, took blame after the game for doing it too early. And, of course, you on Twitter posted, hey, LaFleur, maybe put the freaking starters back in, which was one of, I'd say, roughly 10,000 insults of Matt LaFleur that you have posted publicly since I've known you. Now, you did have a funny during the middle of this absolute butt whipping for a team that was a huge underdog. You did post, quote, like I've always said, I love Matt LaFleur, and that's funny. But seriously, you called that dude an idiot like 10,000 times.
I did.
And you're not alone, but I want to know if there's any chance that anyone wants to put some actual respect on the name of Matt LaFleur. I mean, the dude's 56-27. Yes, he's 3-3 in the playoffs. There's some bitter disappointments in there, but we're just now seeing what a team can do with a QB he's involved in choosing, molds his offense around. And yes, he had Aaron Rodgers previously, which is what everybody did to dismiss his good records early. Also means he was dealing with the single biggest distraction of a player in this league. A dude who caused dissent in that organization, which I think stemmed from the love pick. A dude who's trying to get ESPN sued right now, who at any point when Matt LaFleur dealt with him might have been high AF, alienating family members, cradling himself in a dark room, or re-upping his QAnon VIP subscription so he can spout dumbass conspiracy theories into the world. That's who Matt LaFleur had to deal with. Yes, maybe the most talented quarterback of all time, but a lot of stuff that comes with it. And now look at what Jordan Love has become. Does Matt LaFleur get any credit for that? Does Matt LaFleur get credit for what they are now as, I think, one of the most exciting young teams in the NFL? I put it to you, Robbie Stanley.
He's done a very good job in the second half of the season. I will say that it does feel like the chemistry, and what I mean by that is like the play calling rhythm that he's in right now with Jordan Love. It feels like they figured something out about halfway through the season, right around the time they played against Pittsburgh, and they've not looked back since then. So look, he's done a lot of things that I have disagreed with. He's done a lot of things that I think have been pretty stupid, and I do think that he has cost them at least one, maybe two playoff games when they did have Rodgers and a chance to win a Super Bowl, which has been difficult to overcome. Having said that, I mean, the numbers are what they are, right? They have the fourth youngest team in the history of the National Football League to make a playoff game. I believe they have the youngest team since the merger to win a playoff game. They have a group of skill positions at wide receiver and at tight end that among the pass catchers, none of them are above a second-year player. And he's figured out that actually handing the ball to Aaron Jones when he's healthy and available is a good thing. So I will say, even as somebody who has been a staunch Matt LaFleur hater, which I admit to being, he's done a pretty darn good job as of late. Does that count?
I mean, that was underwhelming. That was underwhelming. I guess we'll have to take it. So remind, I mean, I remember those. I remember, the Packers giving up the freaking TD with 2 seconds left in the half against Brady at home.
Yep.
In the game. So when you say he cost them, you're talking about his play calling or just like other in-game coaching
play calling
stuff?
decisions. He went with a field goal in the Tampa game that he had no business going for, that they should have tried to go for the touchdown. There's that one. And then the real one to me that killed me on him was the 49er game where they lost 13-10 to Jimmy Garoppolo. The play calling in that game was atrocious. Just to totally abandon the run. They tried to force feed Devontae Adams all game long when San Francisco wasn't giving it up. It was not good. It was a terrible play calling performance from him. And look, I did not think in the last year of Rodgers, that they handled things particularly well with the play calling either. And this is part of to take this to the Titans. What do we talk about all the time, Joe? Of the most glaring position in professional sports that is ripe for criticism. It's the offensive coordinator, right?
Yes.
Well, when your head coach is the offensive coordinator, I think he's more ripe for criticism than normal head coaches would be because you see what he's doing and you see the play calls. So I think that's been part of my disdain for LaFleur. And that if the Titans go that route and they hire an offensive guy, I think you'll see more criticism for him because of that if things don't go well.
But if they go as well as they've gone for Matt LaFleur, then you should see more praise, right? Am I right?
They've gone a lot better lately. Look, I will say, you can put all the blame on Dan Quinn if you want to, which I'm sure he deserves some blame. That was as much of a pantsing from a scheme perspective as I've seen in a while. What the Packers did to the Cowboys in that game. I mean, at one point late in the third quarter, the Packers were averaging 9.5 yards per play. Think about that. 9.5 yards per play in a playoff game.
On the road against one of the most talented defenses in the NFL. That's the thing. It's not like, in the NFL, sometimes you just truck someone, but this was a team at home with incredible defensive talent. I mean, that's the thing that, in the state of Texas last weekend, two defenses that I thought were going to, two of the best, two of the top three, probably collections of talent.
Yeah. Browns
and Cowboys got absolutely torched, and play calling, scheming, big part of it.
Do I need to say it? Matt LaFleur, I'm sorry.
That's very nice. I feel better.
Now don't screw it up again.
But I feel
I'm sorry.
For 1 week. I mean, I will say that if somehow the Packers and Lions get to the NFC Championship game, I feel like we should almost do a live remote at some bar. So put that out into the ether.
That could be a dangerous time. 615-737-1025, our phone number. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Gentry Estes from the Tennessean. We'll get his thoughts on the Titans and the coaching search, all those things. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you on this Tuesday morning talking all things Titans. And to help us do that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our friend Gentry Estes from the Tennessean. Gentry, good morning. Thanks for taking time to be with us. Gentry, this is the first time I think we've had you on since Vrabel was discussing with you how much it sucks to lose as head coach of the Tennessee Titans. And now he's not the coach anymore. So I feel like we can't let another moment go by without at least addressing that point.
Yeah, interesting few weeks. Yeah, I guess enough's happened since then. But no, it was funny when that happened. I heard from people I haven't heard from in years. Living all over the country, it's amazing how widespread that got. Just a few moments in a press conference like that.
You became a Pat McAfee regular for a couple days.
You did.
I know. How about that? It was pretty wild, really, but it was moving so fast here. You're going into that last game, and then everything that happened all last week, so it's all kind of a blur. But now the one thing about it was I don't think people, and you guys did a good job kind of setting it up exactly what I asked, but Vrabel had said earlier in the press conference that they needed to win that last game, quote, for a lot of reasons. So I was just following up, asking what he meant by that. And, in hindsight, with everything the way it's played out, it's kind of an interesting exchange.
Yeah, no question about that. So let's just start there, Gentry. The 30,000-foot view of the Titans right now. What do you make of what all has transpired here, the decision to fire Mike Vrabel, and where do you think the Titans go from here with their head coaching search?
Yeah, going from here, I mean, they're casting a really wide net at this point. I think a lot of teams kind of are. I don't know if we know a lot yet about where they're really headed here, but it does seem like, some of the preconceived notions, they want an offensive coach, that kind of thing. Maybe not the case. We'll see as this thing goes. But 30,000-foot view, I think most people would have thought, going into toward the end of the season that it probably wasn't going to work out this way. But I think the more you learn about what was really going on inside that building and, how frayed some of the relationships had become, that it's made more and more sense to me kind of after the fact than maybe it did heading into it.
So where do you think Vrabel goes from here? They're definitely NFL media. He is a darling and has been. I think that he's a good coach. I think that, he should have a job if he wants one, but where do you think that ends up? And what's your concern level with the Titans? Just the organization as constructed. Amy Adams-Strunk, the decision she's made in the last year plus, and then Rand Carthon now, I guess, elevating into a more important role.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think Vrabel will land somewhere. I guess maybe the reports were a little inflated for New England's interest in him, but I think that he is a good coach. There's a lot of openings right now. You have to believe somebody somewhere is going to take a look at this and go, yeah, we'd like to have Mike Vrabel coaching our team. So no, wouldn't surprise me at all to see him land a job before next season. And I think, in terms of the Titans, look, we're going to see how this plays out. And I feel like what happened here is, in a lot of ways, Amy Adams-Strunk was kind of taking control back of the direction of the team into what she wants as opposed to what Mike Vrabel wanted. And we'll see how that goes. Mike Vrabel won a lot of games with the Titans, and that's not an easy decision. But it just felt like, from a fan standpoint, the way everything played out that day, that press conference was just awful that night in terms of, not being able to provide information that not just media, but the fans would want to know about your team. And I do feel like the day it happened, it would have gone a long way for Amy Adams-Strunk to put herself in front of the media and answer a lot of the questions that the fans have about the direction of the team. You put Rand Carthon in front of the media, and there's just certain things, he's just not comfortable discussing, and you're putting someone who was not responsible for the decision, who's having to explain the decision, and it didn't go very well.
No, it certainly did not. So with that in mind, Gentry, how do you view Amy Adams Strunk and Titans ownership? I mean, I do think since she's taken over as controlling owner, she's done a lot of really good things. And, before she did that, this franchise was in a state of disarray, and there was a lot of things that, quite frankly, they were just out of touch with their fan base. So I think she's done a lot towards kind of rebuilding and repairing that relationship. There have been a couple of decisions that appear to me to be a little rash that she's made the last couple of years. So overall, how do you view Amy Adams Strunk and where things currently stand with Titans ownership?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly fair on the decisions. And I think some of it also is the fact that there's this notion that she'll say one thing and then do another. It's happened a couple times now with coaches. And I feel like, look, that's fine. You can be that way as an owner and make these kind of decisions. And a lot of times, if it works out, people will think, people will think you're a genius. So I feel like, once before with hiring Vrabel, it did work out. But you look at it from the standpoint of the Titans at one point had things going really well with John Robinson as the GM and Mike Vrabel as the head coach. And now you don't have either of them. And the question I would have is, you're going to have to bring in someone as a head coach here who has a pretty strong presence in the building. I feel like, with Rand Carthen, that's kind of the question mark here, because I really don't feel like we've been able to really see what he wants to do yet in that GM role. And I think we're going to get a sense for that now. But at the same time, the head coach is going to have a big say here, versus some other places in terms of the identity and the direction of the franchise. And I feel like, if that's certain owners probably wouldn't allow that. And I think Amy Adams Strunk will allow that. But at the same time, it's not easy to win. And I feel like the Titans are in a division where they benefited for a number of years from some of the missteps of the other teams in the AFC South, especially, in terms of ownership and some of the decisions that were made. Now I feel like the Titans are benefiting the other teams in that division.
So who do you like, Gentry? What direction do you like? I'm I guess I'm like a lot of the NFL. Like, I like the hot shot OC, play calling head coach if possible, because most of them work out. But anyone in particular you like? And what do you think about the wide net also that's being cast?
Yeah, I mean, it really is at this point, and we'll see kind of where that's headed. But I think a lot of the names that have come up have been interesting in their own way. To me, Antonio Pierce was interesting because this is a guy that you would view as kind of a slam dunk hire for the Raiders, really. I mean, in terms of making him the full-time head coach, I think the players there are very much in support of that happening. And if the Titans would be able to sneak that guy out of Las Vegas, and that would be an interesting poll. I'll throw another name out there, and I know I'm probably alone in this in terms of what would be my interest. But when you look at a lot of these younger offensive coordinators who've never been a head coach before, I do wonder why they would be preferable to Arthur Smith. And I know everyone always says, "Oh, because Arthur had a chance and he blew it." What happened in Atlanta was Arthur did a pretty good job for about 2 years, never figured out the quarterback position, and then didn't meet expectations this season and got fired. This is what happens in that league when you don't figure out who your quarterback is going to be, or you make the wrong decision on a Desmond Ridder. But I still feel like Arthur Smith's going to be a good coach somewhere. I think he did a pretty good job there without much for a couple of seasons offensively. And you're talking about a guy who a few years ago was that next coordinator, and he's been a head coach before. So I'm wondering why we haven't heard Arthur's name a little more, not just for the Titans, but for anybody.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point there. Gentry, last thing for you here, kind of switching gears a little bit. As somebody who has spent some time around Nick Saban, what did you make of his decision to retire and the replacement that Alabama has hired in Kalen DeBoer?
Yeah, what a week, huh? I mean, to have that coming in. I covered Saban's first three teams at Alabama. I came in there when they were terrible in 2007 and then left right after they won the first national championship. So saw the first building blocks, and I think you knew, look, even before that championship, you could tell about a year in what was coming with that program, the way they were recruiting and just how everything was meshing so well at that university. I think you got the right coach in the right place in terms of, an institution that really was all in doing, everything he would have wanted financially and everything else, and staff sizes, the kind of things Alabama did for about a decade. They set the trend in terms of how much money they're spending on recruiting and staff sizes and just things like that. And it's a perfect setup because you had a coach who really knew how to win with that. And I'm not sure we're ever going to see a coach that driven and that obsessive in terms of when you just saw him go about his job. But I also don't know if you'll ever see a coach land in a situation as perfect as that was for him at Alabama, a school that was really desperate to win and had the resources to do it, and everything came together for a staggering number of years.
Yep, no question about it. Gentry, great stuff as always. Really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning, and we'll talk to you soon.
You bet. Take care, guys.
Gentry Estes from the Tennessee and our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your thoughts on what Gentry had to say. We'll also get into the results yesterday from the final two games of Wild Card Weekend, setting up the divisional round coming up in the NFL this weekend. All that ahead. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser, broadcasting from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. Thanks to Gentry Estes from the Tennessean for being with us in the last segment. That's an interesting thought there. What did you make of what Gentry had to say about Arthur Smith there? Interesting thought from him.
Yeah, no, it brings up very fair points. I think there's a array of opinions about what Arthur Smith did there. And look, I can't sit here and pretend that I watched the Falcons closely enough to know if it was just really all about the QB. I feel like the way they performed in that last game, with so much at stake, even though they needed help. I mean, that was just they just completely collapsed in that game. It appeared had a lot of losses where in the last few years, it seems to me, where they just had a huge defensive gaffe or something, right? Like they had some crushing losses. So I think Gentry brings up fair points there, and we know he was good here. It is interesting. I mean, I've honestly not even really thought about the guy. I'm very interested to see what becomes of him. Does that tenure make him not a viable candidate? I mean, the probable path for him now is to be someone's OC and then see if he can do that well and see if he can cycle himself back up to get a head coaching job. But it's a fair name to bring up. It's funny how, I mean, if you want one fun exercise to do is go through just go back college and pro coaching cycles and look at the hot names at certain times who now you're just like, oh my God. I mean, I remember when Matt Campbell was like, that guy could have any job he wants, Ohio State, whatever. And now it's like, I guess he's all right at Iowa State. So that's
Scott
where
Frost at Nebraska. It's like, oh my gosh, Nebraska's back. They've got Scott Frost.
Exactly. I mean, actually, the funny thing is Harbaugh was that exact same thing too until Connor Stallions showed up. But yeah, there's a lot of that, and it's so Arthur Smith is kind of he's not winning the presser right now. You're not winning the presser with Arthur Smith, But I agree that he's a viable, good coach. And I'm with Gentry too. I think Pierce is a really interesting situation. I guess he'll probably get the Raiders job, but it has been impressive what he's done there.
It has been impressive what he's done. And, we were talking about this with Caroline earlier. I still buy into this. It doesn't have to be an offensive guy. Would that be my preference? Yes, to go hire an offensive head coach and to get one of these play callers in here to do that. Because I think especially with where you are with your quarterback, I think that would be beneficial. Having said that, what if Mike Macdonald is the best option, right? Like you said it yesterday, there have been people throwing it out there that Mike Macdonald might be the smartest guy in the room that they've ever encountered here. So if Mike Macdonald, you feel great about him being a head coach and you feel like he's your best option, I think you should do that if you're the Titans. Even though I can just tell you, if the Titans hire a defensive coach, the fan base is going to be mad about it. They just are.
Yeah, exactly. No, so but yeah, I mean, look, there's just like with everything. I mean, there's way more information they have than what we have, and I guess to me, it's like the hit rate until something changes. And of course, I know a lot of Titans fans will be like, "Well, we'll be the team that changes it," but until the hit rate slows down a little bit, it's awfully high for that Shanahan. Shanahan's tree is like the opposite of the Belichick tree at this point.
Yeah.
Belichick tree was bad. It really has been astoundingly bad if you really think about it. I mean, Bill O'Brien was a good coach. Bill O'Brien was a good coach with Houston, but for the most part, it's just been really rough. And so far, everybody who hangs out with Shanahan and McVay really ends up being pretty good.
Will from Nashville on the text line says, I think Arthur's come undone at the end of games will sour Amy on him. Fair or unfair? I think that's likely a deal breaker for her. Plus, he's a Vrabel guy. Does she want to hire someone so closely tied to him? But that's the thing, though. He was Vrabel's OC, but he's not really a Vrabel guy. He was there with the Titans before Vrabel was.
Yeah, Amy Adams-Strunk was paying Arthur Smith long before she ever met Mike Vrabel. Now, I'd have been paying him $40K a year at first, but I mean, he's his own person who Vrabel kept and then elevated, and ended up being a smart choice by Vrabel. I mean, another example, by the way, of Vrabel. That's not quote elevating a buddy. That's someone he works with who's like, oh, this guy's really good, and it was a very good choice. But again, I'll also go back to Arthur Smith's time and say he did a lot of good things, and he had a lot of really good things going for him with the receivers, with Derrick Henry, with the offensive line, and with Ryan Tannehill. All of them were at high level of performance. How much credit you want to give Arthur Smith for Tannehill playing the best ball of his career during that time? You can. I think he has to have some. I would also give Tannehill some credit, a guy who had multiple 4,000-yard passing seasons in Miami, for helping Arthur Smith look good at times.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think I agree with Gentry. Like, I think Arthur Smith is a good coach, and I thought when he got hired in Atlanta that was a really good move by the Falcons. And then it just goes to show you, like, if you can't figure out quarterback, you just don't have much of a chance, right? I mean, they tried Desmond Ridder, and I think it's pretty clear he's not the guy. Marcus was starting for him for like half of last year. That didn't go well. I mean, when you don't have a quarterback, it's hard to overcome that in this league. And that's why, look, I think the offensive coordinator part of this, like, who knows if Brian Callahan would be a good coach? Who knows if Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick would be a good head coach? But so much of it comes down to the quarterback and the pieces that you have around them. I mean, it's a long way of me saying, like, if you told me that Arthur Smith one day got another crack at being a head coach and had a quarterback that was serviceable, that he'd do a good job, I'd say, yeah, I could probably see that. I just wonder if he'll actually get that shot again one day.
Right. I think it's gonna have to be because he gets an OC shot and it goes really well. And certainly we do see that happen sometimes, in the NFL. I mean, last week, different era and different situations, but it is wild when you think about Belichick, Saban, Carroll, guys, three guys in 24-hour period, all out, two in stunning fashion. Everybody knew what was going to happen with Belichick, but the Saban and the Carroll thing, especially Saban, right, was shocking. But all three of those guys had been, okay, they're decent, fine, whatever, and they were around 50 years old when they, at that point at 50, they were like, yeah, they're okay, good enough to get another head coaching job, and they all did their best work after their 50s. After getting multiple opportunities to prove that. So it's I mean, all of them had been fired from jobs and it really didn't have good records and all that stuff. So now it's a different time, but it's just interesting how that can work sometimes. I think Arthur Smith will have more opportunities to prove himself. Yeah, it's pretty obvious at this point it's not going to be here, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think that's pretty clear. And maybe there is something to Amy Adams-Strunk just wanting total departure from even just the whole Vrabel staffing, all that. To me, if you want a total departure, that's another reason to go offensive play calling head coach, because obviously with Vrabel, that's not what you had. So a lot of times you go the other route. I mean, I guess Mularkey in theory was that he was an OC his whole career. He was an offensive. He was a great OC with the Steelers back in the day. Inspector Gadget, they called him, for people who were of a certain age. And of course, Wisenhunt was supposed to be a genius there, and that didn't work out too well. But again, I mean, at this point, it seems like people who come from that tree are just all good. Somebody's going to be a complete bust, like sometime soon. It has to happen, right? Like, they can't all end up being good head coaches, right? But if you start with, you can maximize your quarterback in this league, I think a lot of the other stuff can take care of itself.
Jackson on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. What are your thoughts on Jim Schwartz as the new Titans head coach? Joe, what do you think of that?
Well, I think Jim Schwartz is, I've said this before, I think he was actually pretty good with a bad situation with the Lions, which, again, most people, for the most of the Lions history, it's been a bad situation with the Lions. Great defensive coordinator. Look, Bobby Slowick took him to school the other day, but, it's just like Dan Quinn. I mean, I think Dan Quinn and Jim Schwartz are both viable candidates. Does Jim Schwartz he just now got back into the full grind of coaching as a D coordinator. Is he also ready to go right back into the head coaching thing? I mean, I would have that question. Remember, he was here in part, his health was not up to being in that grind when he was here helping out for 2 years in a very limited role, by the way. But I mean, I don't dismiss that out of hand. I think if he wants to get into it, I would imagine he'd get some interest.
615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get into the results yesterday of the final 2 games of Wild Card Weekend. Look ahead to the divisional round as well. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you on this Tuesday morning. Taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025. Joe, the final two games of Wild Card Weekend going down yesterday, and a couple of more stinkers for the most part. Pittsburgh, to their credit, clawed back in there kind of and sort of made it a game, but Buffalo ends up winning 31-17. They advance to the divisional round, and Tampa Bay just housing the Eagles last night, 32-9, the final score. So Tampa Bay advancing, the Eagles complete their collapse and go from 10-1 to out of the playoffs in the wild card round after just a destructive last 6 games of the season for them. What did you make of the 2 games that we saw yesterday? And we'll start with Tampa Bay and Philadelphia because there could be some interesting aftermath for the Eagles on that one.
Yeah, no doubt. The Eagles stink. They are garbage, and I just don't understand how that has happened to a team that was 10-1 coming off a play away from winning the Super Bowl. Just wild. Also, I'd like to give a little thought. I sent you guys a tweet on the Browns fandom. The Browns fans today can wake up and say, wow, well, Baker is 1 win away from the NFC title game, and Deshaun Watson locked up here. You had to give the whole world to Deshaun Watson.
Well.
By the way, I already see a lot of people who enjoy the Detroit Lions talking about, oh my goodness, this kid is too good to be true. Tampa Bay at home.
Looking ahead.
Put the Lions in the title game. Let me tell you something. Baker Mayfield might just have the 2 most suffering fan bases in the NFL feeling real bad about themselves in about a week here. Okay. So I'm just putting that out there. I know I said the Rams were going to win last week, but I'm just putting it out there. Don't get all excited. Baker Mayfield is playing great. He has really good receivers. Rashad White's a good back. The Eagles, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to judge because the Eagles can't seemingly tackle anyone ever, but he's running hard. They can throw it around the yard. I tell you what, that's a really good job by Todd Bowles, and that's not a bad football team at all. It's wild to think that either that team with Baker quarterbacking or the freaking Lions will be in the NFC title game.
Yeah, I mean, he looks really good. And you look at what he did in the regular season. I mean, you're talking about, number one, being healthy and available in all 17 games. He threw for over 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, 10 picks, 64.3% of his passes completed. He was really good. And, I didn't think that we would be getting to a point where you start to talk about, like, could Baker Mayfield be the answer at quarterback for Tampa Bay more than just 1 year this year? But I think we're there, and he's done a really good job. And, Mike Evans continues to be Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They got some good players, especially at receiver. But certainly, I mean, they destroyed the Eagles last night. They've been playing really well the second half of the season. They win that, albeit horrible division, but they're the one that comes through it there. And I do think the matchup between them and Detroit is pretty interesting. I would still probably pick the Lions, especially at home in that environment that we saw last week. But yeah, if you're a Detroit fan, number one, if you're a Lions fan overlooking anyone, ha to you. But certainly don't need to be overlooking Baker Mayfield in this offense, because this offense, if they're on, they can make that Lions defense look pretty bad.
Oh, no question. Yeah, Lions defense is not championship caliber. The offense is. The defense very much is not. But the Eagles now, what's the fallout? Sirianni gonna lose his job? I mean, it's how many coaches the year after making the Super Bowl have been fired? I'm sure it's happened, and maybe some people can think of something right off the top of their heads. But it can't have happened often.
Right.
And again, it's like there used to be this thing where the Super Bowl loser would go on to have a rough next season. The NFL is just like one of those weird things that used to happen quite a bit. But I mean, this team was 10-1, and yeah, they'd won a lot of close games. They didn't look as dominant. You knew they weren't as good. But A.J. Brown, you said earlier in the show, he was setting a record. He was lighting everybody up, and they missed him a ton last night. He's their best offensive player, period. But for them, with all the talent they have to look like that last night, basically hapless against the Bucks. My goodness. Maybe Nick Sirianni's out. I mean, that would be a stunning fall. This team just did it. And if he all of a sudden gets fired, my goodness, talk about a drastic turnaround.
So did the Titans win the Kevin Byard trade? We've gotten a lot of those questions so far on the text line this morning. What do you think of that?
Well, look, I mean, to me, it was like I didn't hate what they got in the first place. I don't know why some people are flipping out about it. Corey and Jared and other people are acting like he's an all pro still. I mean, it got something for him, you know. Obviously, once you did that, you were, to me, to some extent punting on the season, and well, we saw how it turned out. So, it's interesting too. Take that conversation into the context of all the discussion about Rand Carthon, because I mean, look, I learned a lot about what had gone on in that building last week in the wake of the firing of Mike Vrabel, and definitely I'd say there a lot of people who talk about like Rand Carthon very much deferred to Vrabel, right? And Vrabel was the dominant personality, and Carthon, maybe he didn't feel comfortable completely asserting himself. Okay, but the Byard trade, I mean, Byard thanked everyone except Rand Carthon in his statement. So I mean, that's Rand. I mean, Rand, there was the talk of the pay cut. So that was something that Rand certainly was empowered to do. It's not like he did nothing. It's not like, and again, the free agent signings, I mean, you can't, that's certainly Rand saying, I really trust this guy. This guy can play. Brunskill, Key, Alshire, right? So it's not like he had no role. I think coming out of last week, I see a little bit maybe too much of like, what did Rand do last year? And it's not quite that extreme. And again, to your point, Robbie, I'd say that move worked out pretty well. I mean, it's a big number they were paying him, and you just have to know when to move on. The Jarrell Casey move at first, I didn't like at all, and it turns out it's like, oh, yep, that was the exact right time to do it.
Buffalo wins 31-17 last night. Josh Allen with a very impressive touchdown run in that game. Snowballs raining down from the crowd as that game's going on. Buffalo wins. Mike Tomlin in the post game was asked about, or was starting to be asked about, probably is a better way to say it, having 1 year left on his contract, and then walks off the stage there. So I don't know what that means and what his future is going to look like there in Pittsburgh. But Buffalo wins, and Joe, that sets up a nice Chiefs on the road, by the way, and Bills divisional round matchup coming up next week. You got the Packers and the 49ers, the Texans and the Ravens, and then, of course, the Lions and the Bucks as well. A very intriguing divisional weekend. Hopefully it's better than Wild Card weekend, which quite frankly sucked. Not very good games, other than one matchup between the Rams and the Lions on Wild Card weekend.
I mean, 5 of 6 games being crap is awful. Just an awful hit rate. And I know the ratings are going to be all great and everything, so people will focus on that, but we got hosed. We got hosed last weekend. So we are owed really good games this weekend. Look, the Ravens, huge favorites against the Texans. The Niners, huge favorites against your Packers. I think the Lions are like 6-point favorites at home. What is the Bills-Chiefs line, by the way? That's an interesting one to me. I mean, that one, I hope, is going to be another classic between those two.
It is Bills by 2.5 at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, that's the fitting last game of the weekend, and so hopefully it lives up to that. But look, I just said I absolutely won't be surprised if the Bucks win. I guess it'd be shocking if like both the Texans and the Packers won. But if you tell me one of those teams is going to pull it off, I can see it. I can see it. We've seen the Ravens blow it before as the 1 seed with Lamar Jackson as the obvious MVP, and the Niners are the best team. Period. But your Packers got something brewing, man. Your Packers, they got something brewing. They're gonna need a little tip pass at the line. They're gonna need a fumble. They're gonna need something like that because the Niners offense is just ridiculous. But I think the Packers offense can make some trouble.
It's gonna be interesting to see how that one goes. I mean, and then there's the old argument too, Joe, of how do you handle the week off? We've seen some teams before when they have the bye week in the playoffs, they come back and it doesn't make a difference. They look refreshed, they look ready to go, and they dominate. And we've seen some teams come that week off and they look bad. And there's really no, like, if you look at the numbers, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. It just kind of feels random how your team responds. But it does feel like, at least once a year, there's a team that had the bye that looks a little rusty to start. And sometimes they're able to dig their way out of it, and sometimes they're not. I'm interested to see, can the Ravens and the Niners prevent that from happening this weekend?
You know what I'm excited by?
What's that?
Is that you just used the term bye week correctly. Kudos. Everyone, this is a bye. This is a bye week. You got a bye
It can
in the
be
playoffs.
used in multiple forms.
Well, it is. It doesn't mean it can be or should be, but I need to get that in and say it as much as possible during this time, so it doesn't.
If you ask
drive me
some people,
crazy.
though,
bye week,
like,
bye week, bye week, bye week, bye week.
the Super Bowl is already determined because the Super Bowl logo colors mirror that of the Ravens and the Niners. So there are some people that think this is already predetermined and that it's going to be San Francisco and Baltimore coming up in the Super Bowl.
This sounds like an Aaron Rodgers ayahuasca trip.
I think he brought that up on the I think he was one of the ones that talked about this.
Shocking. Has that happened before? Or the
I don't
logo
know.
have the uniform colors of the teams that end up playing it?
I don't know. I'm sure it probably has. There's only a limited amount of colors that they can put on these things.
Wow, that would be a good Super Bowl. I mean, I'm not going to be mad if that's what we get.
615-737-1025. Our phone number. Our final thoughts on Wild Card Weekend. Could there be more coaching firings coming throughout the NFL? We'll get into that. Our final thoughts on the Titans coaching search for the day as well coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Tune in to 93.3 Classic Hits this Thursday night for MTSU men's basketball. The Blue Raiders are on the road taking on UTEP with pregame beginning at 7:30, tip-off at 8 o'clock. Coverage also available on the 93.3 Classic app and at 93.3classichits.com. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you. Our text line, which is an interesting place right now. Also saying, Joe, that the last 2 years, apparently, the Super Bowl logos have lined up with the participants of said Super Bowl. So make of that what you will.
The last 2 years they have?
Apparently so.
Okay. Oh, wow. Well, that's got to be true then. Now, just remember, if it's not Niners Ravens, I want people who like stuff like this to remember that and say it. You know what I mean?
What if it is?
Well, then it's obviously the NFL is completely fixed. I mean, they've kind of told you, they've had their commercial like, okay, here's the script for the whole season. You know, they just need to be a little more careful about not telling us with the logo.
Yeah, that's true. We also have this from Matt on the text line, who just takes shots at Joe every day that most of the time are not eligible to be actually read. You're still, his last two text messages, you're still Lansing's biggest loser. Go back, bye. Also, you are the undisputed loser of Lansing. A new movie stars you. Matt Q, bye. Those are the last two texts we have referencing you, Rexrode.
Yeah,
Lancer's loser.
Yeah, I don't read that guy's text. He's a racist POS. So, but there you
go.
There you go. But thanks for participating. I don't even read them, but I guess thanks for reminding me.
You're welcome. There you go. Joe, your final thoughts on the wild card games from last night. Could we see more coaching firings? We've talked about Sirianni with the Eagles. Nothing from Mike McCarthy yet in terms of what his future looks like with Dallas. I would not be shocked if we saw something on that today. And then there's the Mike Tomlin part of this, which, you know, he walks off the podium last night. He's been there for a long time, has never had a losing season. I don't think that they're going to fire him, but some people in Pittsburgh are certainly rooting for that right now. So we'll interested to see what happens there. But do you think we could see more coaching firings? And if so, how many are you expecting?
Well, I think most people, and I would join this, would expect Mike McCarthy in Dallas. An interesting note today that Steven and Jerry and their typical radio thing, they're not doing it this week. So
oh boy,
make of that what you will, but I think that's happening. Right now, I'm really torn on Sirianni. It seems crazy. It really does. But also, it's crazy what happened to that team. And how could you not give him a lot of credit for what they built up to last year? But then how could you not give him the bulk of the blame for what happened this year? I think you said 45%. I'm probably there too. Like, if I had to bet, I would bet Sirianni's the Eagles coach next year, but I don't feel great about it. Tomlin, I don't think they're going to fire him. I don't think they should fire him. I think that he's a coach who consistently does well with what he has, and he hasn't had a good quarterback because Ben was a shell of himself late. He hasn't had a good quarterback that can really win big for you in this league for 5 years. Right? 4 or 5 years. That's something to keep. That's something to keep in mind. But I mean, look, the Steelers had an in-season firing this year of a coach, and that never happens either. So maybe they're actually going to fire a coach. When's the last time the Pittsburgh Steelers fired a head coach? I guess maybe the guy before Chuck Noll.
I guess so. I mean, it's pretty wild to think about. Since the 70s, they've had 3 head coaches. That's why I feel pretty good about Tomlin coming back. But he is on the last year of his deal next year. So I wonder what that looks like. And also, like, if you're that ownership, how do you view Kenny Pickett, and how involved was Mike Tomlin in choosing Kenny Pickett? Because I don't think Pittsburgh is feeling great about where he's at right now.
Yeah, it looks like that quarterback draft was exactly what a lot of people said it was, and they totally reached for him. So, by the way, we have to keep all these takes. Gotta gather them all in one place and just have a segment of takes. But Jared had Pickett as his MVP this year.
I remember that. Yeah, the Steelers going to the Super Bowl too.
Yeah, they looked so amazing in the preseason. So amazing. That is one thing someone said on the text line today is like, do we know at least that the Titans will play their starters more in the preseason? Maybe that should be part of the interview process. Do you like to play starters in the preseason so people can get excited and be misguided about what this team actually might be?
How much work will Traylon Burks get in the preseason? Your answer determines whether or not you're going to be hired by the Tennessee Titans.
Well, now, granted, he may be a gunner for the next coach, so who knows? He may need a lot of it.
He might be. Joel, the net very wide for the Titans in this coaching search. The Thomas Brown news was put out there yesterday of how they've requested permission to interview him, who has been the offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers, which a lot of Titans fans saw and said, the offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants this year, huh? That's pretty interesting. What did you make of that news and how wide this net is for the Titans right now?
Well, the thing is, in both cases, first of all, a year ago, Kafka's a lot more, whoa, look at what they did with Daniel Jones, right? They had a bad year. They had a bad year in a lot of ways. And Thomas Brown, yeah, obviously they are just a terrible team. Terrible. But, it's like Ben Johnson. I think he's really good, okay? I think Ben Johnson's really good, and I think he's creative, like the TD to Laporta against the Rams. Was just a fantastic job of taking a jumbo scheme and basically forcing an edge to cover your tight end on a crossing route. That was beautiful, right? But also, he's got one of the top probably 3 offensive lines, 2 fantastic running backs, a really good collection of receivers, and a quarterback who, when he has a good offensive line, is spot on. So, okay, so let's take those other 2 guys and tell me what they have. You got Saquon Barkley sometimes. It's the constant conversation in this league that we had so much in the last few years about, okay, is Todd Downing an idiot? Is Arthur Smith a genius? Or were their personnel situations so drastically different that they're actually closer than you might think?
That's going to do it for us today. Chase and Big Joe coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3, The Game.